Is this thing on?
I am Queens.
Hi, everyone. My name is Alyssa, and you are listening to the All Things Pelvic podcast, where you get to follow my life as a pelvic floor physical therapist. That may sound a little boring, but real quick, let me break it down. I bring up topics that most people find difficult to talk about, but maybe it's time we get comfortable with discussing the uncomfortable. I always strive for real talk, good vibes, and mostly all things pelvic. Join me and my guests as we discuss healthcare, culture, and real life topics. Are you ready? Because it's time to take a page out of my playbook. Hi everyone, welcome back to All Things Pelvic. Today is a beautiful Thursday. It is close to the end of the week, I should say. And there's kind of been a common theme for me this week. I have been ranting about all of my doula friends and the amazing doulas that I work with. And with that being said, Desirae, please introduce yourself.
Hi, everybody. My name is Desirae, and I am a birth doula. It's very exciting work. I really love it.
Yeah, as you should.
Yeah.
Now, honestly, even just a couple of years ago, I did not know what a doula was, and I just remember meeting one of my coworkers and I was like, "You're a what now?" I was like, "What?" And it kind of made me sad that I was in pelvic floor world and I didn't know, that there are doulas out there. So can you actually just explain a little bit of the work that you do and the difference, of a doula in comparison to like a midwife? Just go for it. Give us the
You got
rundown.
it. All right. A doula, if you want to think, is basically like your birth cheerleader. We are like your birth best friend, okay? Or like your birth hype man or woman. So typically in the United States, doulas work for themselves and we are hired by the birthing person or the birthing family separate from being hired like inside of the hospital, right? Some hospitals do have doula programs, most don't. Okay. Our job is to basically support the birthing person and the partner, the birthing family, and we support in a multitude of ways. So I always think of it in threes. The first is we support you emotionally, informationally, and physically. The second is we support you pregnancy, birth, and the immediate postpartum. There is also another field called postpartum doulas, and postpartum doulas do just that. They support you in the postpartum period. But a birth doula will support you in that early time of postpartum. And I think that, honestly, so let me answer your other question. How are we different from midwives and OBs? So we are not medically trained. Even if we have a nursing background, when acting as a doula to stay in our scope of practice, we do not practice anything medical. We don't do vaginal exams. We wouldn't be the one to come and catch your baby. We are not doing any of those things. We're not checking blood pressures. We're not doing things like that. We are really there to support you in your desired birth. So if you say to me, Desirae, I am not cool with the idea of being in any sort of discomfort, I want an epidural in the parking lot, or you say, Desirae, do everything we can so that I have an unmedicated vaginal birth, awesome. I'm going to support you regardless of what you choose because it's your birth. And I think the most important piece, honestly, is the emotional and the informational support. The physical support, I think, is why we always get hired. Not always. I take that back. Why we often get hired when people think about a doula. But the emotional and informational support that we give, I think, is really different from what someone is getting from their birth team.
Sure.
Think of like you, right? You should be part of everybody's birth team, a chiropractor, a midwife, whomever, right? That's definitely physical support. I think we have the unique perspective of being able to offer the informational and emotional support on top of physical.
Totally. You know how they say you should be learning something new every day? I literally I
Mm-hmm.
just learned so much from even what you just said. Now, I actually didn't realize that there's a difference between a birthing doula and postpartum as well. I mean, obviously those are two different things, so like of course that would
Yep.
make sense, but I just kind of had the assumption that the doula that was helping you through the birthing process may be also the one helping you postpartum, but I didn't realize that there's actually those specific niches in there. That's amazing. Yeah, I think that's so great. And I mean, I was a cheerleader, so I'm all about that life. So I completely understand that, but I also have spoken to a few friends about how they weren't sure who was going to deliver their baby for the most part. So
Right.
I also think then having that person, that so-called cheerleader to
Mm-hmm.
be by your side if you're not sure of that is just an extra comfort to moms in general.
Completely. Um, so if you think about if you have, so let's pretend that you're listening and you have had not had a baby.
Hmm.
I think one of the things that is so shocking to people is how much time you spend alone in the hospital room. Now we're talking like, let's say hospital birth, right?
Hmm.
And let's say you have an OB. You also have nurses. And then let's say you have a support person. Let's say it's your sister. Okay. So you and your sister are there. The nurses come in, they're checking on you and they're checking your blood pressure. Can I get you anything? Do you need any water? Everything looks good. And then they have other patients that they have to go see. And you're sort of sitting there. And if neither one of you and your sister have ever been through this before, that's when I think the wheels can get going,
Sure.
as well as the reassurance that things that are happening are normal or not normal, right? It's really hard to be that support person and see the person that you really care about in any sort of turmoil, discomfort, whatever they might be experiencing. And I think that's why when you talk about having a doula with you, you hear that there are decreased requests for an epidural, decreased incidences of cesarean, because we are there with you the entirety of your labor. And the other thing to mention is that they work on shifts, doctors and nurses. So if you come in and their shift ends at 7 and you get there at 5, unfortunately at 7 you're going to have a switch. So sometimes we're there for 24, 30 plus hours. We never leave your side, and we know you really well before that.
Right.
I don't. We could probably talk about this at the end, but on my Instagram account on social media, I had Dr. Neil Shaw come on. He is an OB in Massachusetts, talk about birthy things. I was like really fangirling, seriously, because he's so brilliant. But he said, and I think this is so important to mention, birth is a team sport, and it is the only team sport where you very well have not met the members of your team before it's time to play your game.
Wow. That's a really cool way of putting it. And it really does put things into perspective. Like if we were going to go play a football game, baseball, volleyball, it's always hard when you don't know the players.
That's right. And the doula is sort of that in between, because the doula has been with the birthing person. I mean, sometimes for me, sometimes I'm hired even before the birthing person is pregnant. And I can support them through trying to conceive. And sometimes we're hired as early as like 4, 5, 8 weeks. And so we spend hands down way more time, phone calls, texts, meetings, sessions with our clients than an OB or midwife probably ever would.
And then you also just said you're there for the entire birth as well. So, okay. I have a lot of questions.
Yeah.
I have a lot of questions. I mean, clearly, yes, of course. So, kind of two that lead into each other a little bit. Now, you're clearly passionate about this. Like I'm passionate about my field as well. I think most of us are that go into this type of work, right?
Yep.
But, okay, first things first, how did you get into this? Because since you are so passionate about it, I feel like, and you don't have to disclose like too much, but I'm kind of feeling that something personal happened here.
Absolutely.
Okay. So there's that. And then nothing that sparks, the next thing that sparks for me too is like, you are with these, your clients for this amount of time. Like, what are typical sessions like for you? Appointments with them? Yeah, I need to know those two things.
All right, I'm going to tell you all the things.
Yeah.
So let's go back, right? Let's go back in time.
Love it.
Okay. I went to school for entrepreneurship. I knew that I always wanted to run my own business. I wasn't really sure what kind of business. I actually thought for a while I wanted to have a magazine that just talked about food because I love food. But that's for another day and another podcast episode. And I went through like all the things, like, like a kindergartner. I'm like, I want to do this and this. But I knew I wanted to run my own business. Okay. And then you get out of school and you get a job in like the corporate world. And sometimes it's kind of hard to make a break into starting something because when you get sucked up in that corporate world, the money is good. Mm-hmm. And then when you leave, it's like there's all this instability. In the meantime, while I'm working in corporate, and I always tell my clients that I'm a lady in the streets and a freak in the spreadsheets. They get that. It's true. I've got the corporate background, even in my doula business. My husband and I had been together for now like almost 13 years, but we decided that we were going to get married and add to our family. My husband has 3 kids, so we wanted to be a blended family. Mm-hmm. And I remember when we started talking about this, thinking to myself, not realizing that this thought was like a little bit insulting to my husband, who, like I just mentioned, has 3 children. I was like, well, who the hell is going to support me during the birth? Like, the poor guy, And I never even heard the word doula. I didn't even know that this job existed. But I remember thinking that. And I think even having that thought reassures me over and over that I'm doing the right thing, because it just seems like such common sense that we shouldn't be doing this solo. Right? Like there should be a lot of love and support around. And my parents aren't alive anymore. And my grandma was older at the time before she had passed. And I remember thinking, like, I will have no family to help me. Like, who will I ask questions to? Who will come and help me, like, with the baby after? And so I started searching, and I found it. At first, I found postpartum doula. I was like, oh, cool. So this person can like come help do overnights and help you figure out feeding. And then I found out about a birth doula, and I was like, oh, all the like sciencey nerd loving anything medical in me was so intrigued. And then I've also always been like mothering to people and to my friends and just wanting to take care of people. And so this like idea started, and I looked into certification programs, and I jumped in head first. I was like, how is that saying goes? Feet first, head first. I don't know. Yeah. I dove in.
Yeah, I was just going to say diving. Is that what we're looking for?
I have no idea. I cannonballed into it. How about that? I did a cannonball. And actually, it was more like a belly flop, because I started doing my training and my certification. And in the meantime, my husband and I are trying, and there's like no baby coming. Mm-hmm. And so these two things that are like definitely polar, like on polar opposites, are happening at the same time. And fortunately for me, I stumbled upon the support community for infertility and loss that Instagram has randomly. Sure. And I started meeting people and talking to people. And with my doula certification, I needed to attend 3 births to become certified. Well, I remember being scared about that, because I thought to myself, how am I going to be in the room and watch somebody have a baby if I cannot have a baby myself? And this is all that I want. It was really scary. And one of the women in my support system became pregnant after infertility. And she said, well, why don't you just come to my birth as like one of your births? And so I put the things I was learning into practice with her during her pregnancy. And what I really learned very quickly was that expecting after the unexpected, and I will talk about why I say it like that, but expecting after the unexpected brings a complete set of unique needs. And whether that is because someone has had a loss and they feel detached from their pregnancy out of fear of another loss, or anxiety, whatever it is.
Right.
And I thought to myself, wow, like there's something here. And then I go to her birth and it was magic. It was like, I remember driving home and I felt like high on adrenaline. I was like, wow, holy cow, that was something else. And I want more of that. And that's when I decided that I wanted to specialize in what I used to call pregnancy after infertility and loss, but now I call expecting after the unexpected, because as we know, it's not just pregnancy. And I'm so glad we're talking about this during mental health awareness, right? Because and like so maternal mental health.
For anybody that doesn't know, it is Mental Health Awareness Month. We are still in the month of May right now.
Yes.
And it's super important to talk about. Sorry, hon, go ahead, continue.
No, it's totally true. So the emotions that come with this don't necessarily have to impact the person who is pregnant. And it can be the partner. It can be if that person is using a surrogate and their baby is growing in someone else, same-sex couples, people who have adopted embryos or done sperm and egg donation. And I just didn't like using that word pregnant because I felt like it was excluding certain people. So I say expecting after the unexpected. And those are the people that are sort of like my bread and butter that I love to support. Fortunately, also for me, I had my first daughter with our very last embryo via IVF about 3.5 years ago. And then, I don't know if Mercury was in retrograde or something crazy, but after being with my husband for 12 years and never getting pregnant one time on our own, we got pregnant during the pandemic. And so now I have a 3-month-old, which is amazing.
Oh my goodness, I didn't realize there's a nugget, like an actual 3-month nugget.
There's a tiny little nugget. Well, she's got like chubby cheeks. She's like
not
a
the tiniest nugget.
Yeah.
Congratulations. I mean, first of all, I always think Mercury's in retrograde, so anytime like something slightly bad happens to me and does not go my way, I just blame it on the universe always.
Yeah.
What I must say, we just even based off of, your story of getting pregnant, I found that a lot in quarantine. Like a lot of my friends got pregnant during that time. And I think it's because everybody just like stopped, less stress. There was, stress in many, many other ways. But everything just kind of calmed down. But amazing.
I mean, it was the farthest thing from in the realm of possibility for us.
Yeah.
Because we were told like that wouldn't happen. And so even being in that situation helped me to become a better doula, because there were all these interesting emotions that came with that. So you asked me about my sessions. So that's how I became a doula, and now I'm a doula.
Yeah, thank you for sharing your story. I always appreciate. Yeah, of course, I always appreciate that, and that makes a lot of sense. You have a lot of personal things going on, and in a moment where you felt alone, and you wanted that support, and you got it. You got it, and I think that's so amazing. And so, okay, I always have all the questions.
Yeah.
What are if somebody reaches out to you, says, I want a doula, I want a birthing doula, what is the process? How many sessions do you offer, and how does that go? And then how many clients do you even have? Because then if you
this is a crazy time.
Oh yeah.
I know.
Please go ahead. Tell us everything.
So typically, I always say to people,
Yes.
you should hire your doula as soon as possible.
Yep.
For people that are expecting after the unexpected, I think they're a little nervous. I will say people expecting after the unexpected become pretty superstitious people. And I think we're just afraid that something will happen, right?
Yeah.
And I always tell people, like, that should be so far off your radar. Like, God forbid you had a loss or anything, I would not even think about, like, taking $1 from you. But I think you're going to pay the same whether you hire us at 38 weeks or 8 weeks. So it only benefits you to hire your doula as early as possible, because the longer you get to spend with each other and really allow your doula to get to know you and your values, the better that doula can advocate for you.
Sure.
And teach you to advocate for yourself. So typically I like to offer what I call 3 prenatal appointments. So this is before the birth. And the first one is usually around 20-ish, then maybe like 30-ish weeks, and then 36 weeks. And we're talking about everything from, tell me about yourself. Tell me what's important to you. Who are you guys? How did you get here? Is there anything really important that I need to know about? Do you have your provider? Do you like your provider? So this is a big thing that I talk about. Doulas we have a really unique perspective of the fact that if we are not hired by a hospital, we have attended births at many different hospitals with many different providers, so we can give you the scoop. Now, the thing that's I think great about that is you'll look on Facebook groups or talk to people and they're like, oh my gosh, I love my doctor, they're so great. And they probably are. And I say, like, that's wonderful. That's great when that doctor's great in that situation. We get to see when doctors are great in tough situations and not tough situations. So we get a really well-rounded perspective. And we also understand hospitals' policies and procedures.
Sure.
So we can, and often do, help with recommending things like that. And if a change is appropriate for what your desire is, I think that's absolutely something that you should and can do, and we can support you through that. So we talk about those sorts of things. What do you even imagine your birth is like? And then we start to talk about exercises that you can do. A lot of doulas, we end up doing like all the certifications because we're just info junkies. We just love birth.
Yeah,
we're weirdos.
Of course
Yeah.
we do.
And so we're constantly like attending classes from other people and like doing all this knowledge share. And so we'll teach some of those things. And then we can help with your registry and planning things like that. Then we start to get into what I call the birth framework. I do not use the word plan ever, because I think plan is misleading, that you have this huge sense of control. And I never want to promise that anything is going to go any way. Actually, in fact, if we make that promise, it'll probably not go that way. So
because when you think about a plan too, it gives the idea that something isn't going to change.
Yeah, well. And you have to remain so incredibly flexible.
Totally.
When you
I like that framework.
Yeah,
might
framework.
Steal that.
Yep.
Might start to use it.
You can totally use it. You can leverage it from
Love
me.
Love it.
So we go through that and we talk about, and I like to do that early on so that there might be things that we talk about and you'll say, I have no idea what that is. And that's great, because that means we're going to go on a trip together to learn more about those things. What are these procedures? What are these, interventions? Who does them? What do they mean? What are the risks? What are the benefits? What is the hospital where I'm birthing at's policy? What are the home birth midwives' policy about that at my house? Things like that. And then I always get into, well, what if we can't have this kind of situation? What is most important to you so that we can bring that through to plan B and plan C?
Yeah.
I always talk.
Yep.
Yes. I will ask questions mostly like, like what do both of you want from this? If they're a couple, what's most important to you? Do you have any fears? Do you have any concerns? We talk about medical history, obviously, if they have any kind of risk, like high risk. Then we start to talk about building the dream team, right? Like pelvic floor PT.
Yay!
Get them on speed dial.
I know nothing about that.
Yes. Chiropractic. Let's see, like acupuncture, things like that they can also do. And again, we work a lot with other birth workers, so we have great referrals to complement everything together. And then we will, towards the end, we start talking about how we're going to get you ready. So the next framework that I do with my clients is a feeding framework. Whether you choose to body feed, breastfeed, chest feed, or you want to bottle feed, or you want to do a combination of both, let's plan for how that is going, what you can do to set yourself up for success. So really, like when I think about my practice, I want my clients to be as proactive rather than reactive as possible. And then I say, take this feeding framework and get a cute magnet, put it on your fridge so that when things are stressful and baby's not taking a bottle in the middle of the night, or this formula doesn't agree with them, or you have a poor latch and your nipples are really sore, who can you go to for support? What sort of troubleshooting can you do? And I can teach my clients a breastfeeding class as well. And then we start to do towards the end, like how we can get our house ready. What supplies do we need for a vaginal versus a cesarean delivery, or birth rather. I don't like to use the word delivery, but a cesarean birth. And then the last thing that we do is we do a postpartum framework, which I think is the most important piece.
Totally.
Your pregnancy it's actually 10 months. Don't let people lie about this 9-month thing. 40 weeks does not equal 9 months. I don't know how that happened.
It's actually so true. I never really
lies. It's all lies, right? And your birth, like, oh God, let's do worst case scenario, is going to be like a few days. But how long are we postpartum for?
A long freaking time. So
forever.
Yeah.
I mean, forever.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Our body is never. It is permanently changed by, like, physiologically, right?
Yeah.
And emotionally and mentally. And I see that this is where the preparation is the weakest.
I think. Okay, I have my thoughts on that. I have my thoughts on that for sure. Preparation's the weakest, first of all, because as soon as that baby comes out, attention is on them. So it's
no one cares. About the mom.
My friends, even who are postpartum officially now, their babies are super little, and I do make a point sometimes to just say, like, okay, how are you? How are you? Because if you are not okay, like, how is the baby going to be okay? And I talk to my patients a lot, especially my patients who are pregnant. And, of course, we ask a lot about how are your checkups going? Is the baby doing okay? But, like, is mom doing all right too? That's really important to ask. And postpartum depression is something that is very overlooked. It is insanely overlooked. My podcast episode that was released today, one of my lovely moms, who is also your friend too.
She is my dear friend. I love her.
She opened up about how, how her doctor pretty much read off of a questionnaire for postpartum depression, and she checked off all of the boxes and thought that she was kind of going crazy. And not knowing that is actually, like, clinically what postpartum depression is. It's your hormones, first of all, are raging at that time.
That's right.
And for multiple reasons, to, like, help feed the baby, because you also just had child. Like it's just
Yep.
you just produced a human. So like
That's
your
right.
hormones are raging. Like I could go on a rant about this honestly all day, just because it
Yep.
bothers me a lot that it's not talked about enough. Even
Yeah.
I actually tell some of my moms too. I'm like, okay, but have the baby, but then like come in and like I'm just gonna pamper you
Yes.
for an hour. Like
Yes.
screw like my actual PT session. Like I will just pamper you for an hour. That way you have some peace and quiet. Or bring
Mm-hmm.
the baby if you want. I'll hold them. I'll
Mm-hmm.
hold them while we do other things. It's just yeah.
There is um there is a huge area of opportunity here
Mm-hmm.
in the United States. This is another thing that I talked about with Dr. Shaw that was on my account for an Instagram live. And I was so excited to ask him because I think he's amazing. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to ask an OB. Basically, what the hell is going on? Like, how do you think it's okay to birth a child and then not check on that mom for 6 weeks?
Yeah.
How is this okay here?
Yeah. Yeah.
And how many times is that baby seen in those 6 weeks? Tons of times. Okay. Meanwhile, everybody's coming over. They want to hold the baby and all these different things, right? So what I learned, I have girlfriends that live in England, is that the midwife comes to the house and checks like at 2 days postpartum and then a week postpartum, then like 2 weeks. What?
Yeah.
And sits there and talks to you and like helps you. That's
Totally.
bananas.
And they check for abdominal separations.
That's
to
right.
Make sure that you're okay. And that's where it gets really, really sticky as a pelvic floor PT as well, because my mom's of course asked like, when should I come in? Is it that 6-week checkup and stuff? And I always say, I'm like, listen, technically you can come to me beforehand. However, make sure to just let your doctor know. Like I even one of my patients' daughters, who I ended up seeing privately because she could not move. Like she genuinely could not move after she had her baby. She was 2 weeks in, and I was just like, oh, no, because her midwife didn't know the extent of it, and she was like, no, at 6 weeks, like go get checked up. So my patient called me and was just like, listen, like, is there anything we can do? So like I actually called the midwife and I was like, listen, like this is what I do. I'm a pelvic floor PT. I can help her do this, and this. And she was like, oh, please go see her. Done. And that was at 2 weeks. So it's also just letting these providers know about what you do too. And it sometimes takes that one phone call. I could have easily just said, okay, well, you know what? She's saying 6 weeks. Like, let's just wait. But sometimes it's just education and advocating for your patients, your clients, whoever it is, and you go from there. So
absolutely,
I think that is starting to change, where people,
I agree.
Where people are realizing it a little bit more, which I'm very, very grateful for. But you said some things that kind of, you have all good points here, all good points that I'm seeing. Yeah, making your head big over here.
Yeah, I know.
And
Thank
rightfully
you.
Rightfully so. But it seems like you definitely include, we mentioned Mental Health Awareness Month, and you include a lot of mental prep into your clients and your sessions. And I think that, that's how I am as a PT as well. And I actually I've had some patients also say that to me. Like I feel like I'm also getting a lot of mental clarity with my body, in connection with the physical. And I do kind of take pride in that, because I think that the mind-body connection is super, super important. So would you say that with each client you include the mental health aspect? Is it something that you just always try to include?
I include it with every client, every touch base.
Yeah.
Every time.
Yeah.
How are you? I'm good. But now, how are you really?
I love that.
Every time. So whether we're talking about a client who falls into expecting after the unexpected, so for those clients, sometimes, I know you had asked earlier about sessions. For those clients, I also offer like an upgrade. I call it my deluxe package. And what we do is we do a weekly check-in. It's just 30 minutes. And this is like, yes, you can update me on doctor stuff, but this is more like this week, my anxiety was really, really bad. I've been milestone chasing, for example. This is a big one. Like, I have the worst anxiety, but I told myself, like, as soon as I get to my next ultrasound, I'm not going to be stressed anymore, and I'll start preparing for the baby.
Oh, yeah.
So we'll talk about like tiny little things that we can do to break down to the next, like, what can we do over the next week to be mindful? And just, I'm also checking in case I ever feel worried, because you talked about postpartum depression, right? And I'm writing notes for, obviously nobody can see me because it's a podcast, because I don't want to forget to say this, because I do, as we talked about earlier, have a 3.5-month-old, so my brain doesn't work at full capacity.
Of course.
But, so yes, I'm checking in with like how I think they're also doing emotionally, and making sure I'm offering them emotional support. I am making sure that I am a safe place for them, and making sure that they know I am not a therapist. And so if I see anything or hear anything, then I will, at this point, hopefully feel like I have a close enough relationship with them to offer, like, hey, are you seeing somebody? Are you talking about these things? But sometimes you had mentioned postpartum depression, and how that whole evaluation works. You can also experience what we call like antenatal or perinatal mood disorders. Antenatal would be like while you're pregnant. That can even start during pregnancy. And I've had some really scary situations where I've had to like talk to partners and be like, I think you need to call the provider, the doctor, because of HIPAA, I can't, right? And one of the things that I suggest to when I kind of see things like that are concerning with my clients is I say, before this baby comes, could you please talk to your doctor or the hospital and and your therapist, and sign whatever papers need to be signed so that your partner can speak to them on your behalf. Because you don't see your doctor for 6 weeks, your partner or whomever is supporting you is. Right. And sometimes they will see it first. And if they need to pick up the phone and talk to your therapist or talk to your midwife, and you don't think there's anything wrong, you can't see it, or you don't want to talk about it, you might say, no, I'm not giving you permission. So I tell people to do it ahead of time.
Yeah. That's smart.
And
I think that's very
the other
smart.
thing, the other thing is that I think when we talk about maternal mental health and maternal mental wellness, we don't talk about it enough. And not only do we talk about it enough, I don't think there's enough education about exactly what it can look like. So they fall under this category called PMADs, like perinatal mood and anxiety disorders. And postpartum depression is only one of them. So you can also be suffering with postpartum anxiety, postpartum rage, postpartum OCD, or postpartum psychosis. And I think that postpartum psychosis is the one that gets all this attention, right? Like a mom was in a really bad way and she tried to hurt her children or she hurt herself. That is like 1% of the people who have a perinatal mood and anxiety disorder.
Sure.
When you fill out that form, so it's like sometimes they put it on a clipboard, hand it to you when you check in, and then it's just scored. And if the score is a certain something, they don't really talk to you about it. And I think that is targeted more towards postpartum depression and not postpartum anxiety or postpartum OCD, which I think are way more common than people realize. I can speak for myself. I definitely had postpartum anxiety. I was so blissed out. I was like not feeling depressed at all. I could not believe I had this little bundle in my arms. And at night, I didn't sleep. I would worry about our house catching on fire. And I would think to myself, this is too good to be true that I got through this pregnancy and birth and everybody's healthy. And what if the house catches on fire? How will I get her out? We are on the second floor. She's too little to drop out of the window. Should I go on Amazon and get one of those ladders that I can throw out of the window? But if I get one of those ladders, would I be able to carry her in one arm and climb down the ladder in another arm? And it just, and so it spirals. But those are not the type of questions that are on that form.
No,
and
not at all.
Or postpartum rage, where you're just angry and screaming. And so there needs to be this education well before what we consider the postpartum period.
Of
and that is
course.
why I think doing the postpartum framework as if it's a couple, like as a couple, and talking about how we're going to plan for how things might change, who will we each have for support, is one way to try to mitigate the risk of that happening. It won't, I mean, it's not 100% like that it will prevent that, right? But now we have more education and things to look for, both people, or maybe a grandma that lives at the house, or whomever can be looking out. And if we talk about this more, our friends will know more about it and might be able to say something to us.
Totally. And I think that word of mouth is by far one of the biggest things. Like, it could be a sticky thing, you know, especially if you're talking about your experience versus your friends.
That's right.
But even with what you just said, like having that education in your head, because I think we all do, we all worry, but at the end of the day, we're like, oh, might not be me.
Right.
I'm going to be a super mom. I'm going to be, you know, this and that. I even, one of my patients was just like, oh my God, you're probably going to power through any of your future pregnancies. And I was like, and maybe not. But you know what? I have the education behind me, and that's all I can do. That is all I can do. And keeping it there. But I think we all do sometimes. We have that superhero vibe. Especially if somebody like yourself, entrepreneur, you know, doing your thing, and you have this mentality like everything will be okay. But you know what? Like life is scary. Life is scary. So I think that having that knowledge in your head and having that education and just being very straight up with clients, like honestly, no, like your delivery might not be the best thing ever. It might not be that. And that's where it's important to have that framework that you know, that you do discuss with them. And I like that you kind of word it in that way, you know, just to let them know, like, plan for this, plan for that, especially your postpartum plan, you know, with the partners or whoever you have that, you know, hopefully that is there to help you and stuff too. That's a beautiful plan, because it's true. Unfortunately, it needs to be ourselves. If you are an adult in the US, like, you cannot have somebody else speak upon your behalf. You can't. It is what it is. We are not allowed to legally talk to somebody unless it is you. So I think that is genius, honestly. It's genius, especially if you know that somebody might need help and they're not willing to see it.
And this postpartum plan, I think, is, you mentioned, and going off of what I said about how, you know, if I'm sitting with a couple and we'll say, okay, like, who's going to do this later? Who's going to do that? You know, we just kind of talk just basic things, even about like, well, now who's going to take out the garbage? Who's going to do X, Y, Z? What does your maternity, paternity leave look like? Things like that, right? That's important. It is even more important if this is a single parent.
Yeah.
And it is really important right now when we are living through a pandemic and the isolation is something that we've never experienced before. The way that we birth in hospitals at home is different. In some ways, there are some good things, I think, that have come out of it. I say that I do not mean about anybody, obviously, being sick with like COVID or all of the lives that have been lost. What I mean by that is we are limiting, for example, like at hospitals, the amount of visitors that can come. And that's lousy when you want a support person during your birth. But there isn't your whole extended family sitting in the waiting room trying to see your baby after your baby's born. You're sitting there, maybe with your partner, maybe with your sister, your brother, whoever your support person is, and you're really getting to bond with your baby in that special time. Same thing about people having visitors to the home after. So many times I would have conversations before, I really don't want people to stop by, but I feel bad saying no. And I'm like, now you just blame everything on the pandemic. Like, I'm sorry, you know, like, we're not having visitors at the house.
No, that's like actual real talk. Yeah, 1,000%.
And so, of course, like, there are not, I wouldn't wish this to ever happen, what's happened to our country or the world, right? but we have to also recognize that we needed to kind of take a pause.
Yeah.
And we needed to focus on community. And nobody should go through their pregnancy alone. Nobody should go through their birth alone, and nobody should go through the postpartum period alone. And that's why I loved when Dr. Shaw said that, because that is not how birth and child rearing was designed. And that is why I love Alexis from Not Safe for Moms, for Mom Group.
My girl.
Because yes, I was an early follower of Not Safe for Mom Group, and I remember thinking, as a New Yorker who lives in Connecticut, because sometimes I think my directness is not for everybody here, but that's okay. It's okay,
that I
right?
can definitely relate to.
Right?
That's for damn sure.
But to pretend like you have all your, can I swear?
Yes,
that you have
always.
all your shit together as like a brand new mom, and when you want to talk about the real stuff,
that's bullshit.
That is why we are in the situation that we're in.
Right.
That is why. Like, for example, okay, I had you on my account, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I have attended almost 100 births, and I have talked to lots of people about birth and how they're feeling in the postpartum period. And I've taken classes. I was not prepared for the way I was going to feel after my vaginal birth. I had a cesarean the first time, and then I had a VBAC. Yeah. And I later found out that I had prolapse, but I was like, why, when I've called and talked to my clients, when I've asked you if you guys are okay, has no one told me that, like, it feels like everything is falling out of my body. Like, I was not prepared for that.
Right.
And when I have some clients that I've kept really close with, and I'm like, hey, after blah, 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 it was terrible. I was like, why didn't you tell me when I asked you? Why did you lie? Well, it's just embarrassing. It's embarrassing to talk about. I'm like, first of all, I just watched you have a baby, so you shouldn't be embarrassed with me. But beside that, that's the problem. Like, that people are getting shamed for talking about this very real stuff that the majority of us are going to go through to some extent or another.
Yeah. So I don't give a shit about talking about anything. I will talk somebody up the wall about whatever I want. Right. But all it takes is for somebody without our personalities, let's say they're a little bit more on the timid side, to say one thing and to have somebody say, why are you telling me about that? That's all it takes, is that one second of one person saying that for them to then shut down, and then they don't want to talk about it anymore. So that's where, even with my questioning sometimes with my patients too, wording is also really, really important, because there are plenty things that my patients definitely do not disclose until maybe a few sessions in or something too. And then of course I'm kind of just like, oh my gosh, in my head, I'm like, why didn't you tell me that? But at the same time, it's not easy, to always talk about these things. So I do understand that, but I also think it is culture where it kind of is honed in our brains for us to say, maybe you shouldn't say that, because you wouldn't say that at the dinner table. But I wish that could change. I do, but then I think that's where, kind of to circle back, the importance of having that team, because you know what? Okay, maybe I didn't tell my midwife this, but my doula knows, and
that's right.
She can now, or he can now, disclose that to my midwife, if need be, if need be.
And I think when we talk about these things, right? The other thing that we're teaching, like I said earlier, is that I do think the physical support is not the most important piece, because
you just said the informational, all of the other things.
That's right. So if we're talking about things like this and we're providing people with information. You provide your patients with information. I provide my clients with information. Then when something doesn't seem right, we can speak up for ourselves and advocate for ourselves versus, well, nobody talks about it. I didn't know that it could feel like my ass was falling out. Like, cool. That's really amazing.
Right.
Like, I sneezed one time and I was like, I don't even know what just happened to my body.
Right.
Like, it was
like, did my ass
horrifying.
fall off? Like, what happened?
Yes. I like thought I sneezed myself inside out. It was so scary.
Right.
Okay. Like, had other girlfriends and I, like, over cocktails or whatever, talked about that, I probably would have called my midwife earlier and been like, you know, I don't know, like, this just, it hurts and I know it's going to feel different, but like, is this really like normal? Is this okay? And even if you get the answer that everything's fine, like, we shouldn't feel like we're burdening our team.
Nope.
That's why we work for you. You are the most important person. You can, well, please don't text me every 5 minutes.
Yeah.
but you can, right?
I tell my patients all the time, you know, they're like, oh, you know, I was going to email you. And I was like, you could have, you know, I might not answer every 5 seconds because, you know, I'm treating or doing something, but I will answer you, you know, and I'm happy to answer that question. And
I know.
And I think, I mean, that's kind of the point of my podcast too, you know, and most of the practitioners and workers that I do know, you know, we do want to advocate and get the word out there and keep that up. And I must say, you know, after talking to you here, and I know we did like an Instagram live and stuff together, but I tell people all the time how much I love doulas, birth workers, anybody at postpartum workers, whoever it is, whoever I can come up of a team with to work with. But even after just talking to you today, like, I do think I just have like a better sense of what you guys take on so much, and it's a beautiful thing. It's genuinely a beautiful thing. But where can people find you with all this good information and to, you know, book you and all that stuff too?
Oh, amazing.
Tell us.
People can find me at my website, which is www.harmonybirths.com. And I'm pretty active on Instagram, and that is Harmony Births.
Yay. And guys, as always, you know, I will be posting that information. And Desirae, thank you so much. Honestly, like,
You're so welcome.
I try to take pride in what I do know, but there's still so much to learn, and I'm so happy to talk to you about it. So thank you so much.
I am happy to chat. Thank you.
Well, gotta have you on here again, right?
Sounds great.
Thank you guys so much for listening to the All Things Pelvic Pod. Have questions, concerns, comments? Want to share your story? Remember to follow me on Instagram at @the_pelvic floor playbook. DM me, share my stuff, like it, and let me know what you think. As a reminder, this is not medical advice by any means, so don't be out here doing a bunch of nonsense in these streets. If you need me and want a vibe, you know where to find me. I'm out.